The fluorescent hospital lights buzzed overhead as I stared at the cracked ceiling tiles, my phone vibrating against the metal bed rail, with another congratulations text meant for my brother Ryan. My ribs screamed with every breath, and the metal pins holding my shattered left leg together sent waves of fire up my spine. Outside my window, the Colorado sunset painted the Denver skyline orange and purple, the same colors that decorated the banquet hall, where my parents were celebrating Ryan's law school graduation ceremony instead of sitting beside their critically injured son. 28 years of being the afterthought had led to this moment, lying broken and alone, while my family toasted their golden child 2 miles away. Growing up in the manicured suburbs of Lakewood, I learned early that love in the Peterson household came with conditions. Our 2-story colonial house, with its white picket fence, looked perfect from the outside, just like our family photos that lined the hallway stairs. Dad worked as a senior insurance executive at a downtown firm, pulling in 6 figures and driving his pristine silver BMW to the office each morning. Mom taught English literature at Jefferson High School, her lesson plan spread across the kitchen table every evening as she graded papers with her red correction pen. Ryan arrived when I was 2, and from his first breath he commanded every spotlight in our home. While I struggled through elementary school with undiagnosed dyslexia, Ryan read chapter books before kindergarten. When I brought home B- report cards, Ryan earned straight A+ marks without studying. My parents celebrated his achievements with elaborate dinner parties, inviting neighbors and relatives to witness their prodigy recite Shakespeare or demonstrate calculus problems at age 12. I found my place in woodshop class during 7th grade, discovering I could build anything with my hands. My fingers, clumsy with pencils and keyboards, moved with precision around power tools and measuring tape. I crafted jewelry boxes, birdhouses, and coffee tables that teachers praised for their craftsmanship. But when I excitedly showed my parents my blue ribbon-winning bookshelf at the county fair, Dad glanced up from Ryan's science project and muttered something about useful hobbies before returning his attention to my brother's volcano experiment. High school crystallized the family dynamic. Ryan dominated student government, quarterbacked the varsity football team, and scored 1,500 on his SATs as a junior. College recruiters filled our mailbox with scholarship offers, and my parents hosted recruitment dinners where coaches praised Ryan's intelligence and athletic ability. Meanwhile, I spent afternoons in the school workshop building sets for drama productions and repairing broken desks for teachers who appreciated my skills. The night of my graduation, I straightened my cap and gown, hoping my parents would acknowledge my achievement. I had earned my diploma despite the learning challenges, maintained a solid C+ average, and been accepted to the community college construction program. But as I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I spotted empty seats where my family should have been sitting. They had driven 3 hours to Denver for Ryan's regional science fair competition, leaving me to celebrate alone. After graduation, I enrolled in the construction technology program at Red Rocks Community College, while working part-time for Martinez Brothers Construction. The physical work suited me perfectly. I learned electrical wiring, plumbing installation, and finish carpentry from experienced tradesmen who valued skill over academic credentials. My hands scarred from tools and calloused from labor-built foundations, framed walls, and installed cabinets that would shelter families for generations. At 22, I launched Peterson Renovations with a secondhand pickup truck, basic tool collection, and $3,000 in savings. My first client, Mrs. Henderson, hired me to remodel her kitchen after seeing the cabinet work I had completed for her neighbor. Word spread through her church and community groups, leading to bathroom remodels, basement finishing projects, and deck installations. I worked 12-hour days, 7 days a week, slowly building a reputation for quality craftsmanship and reliable service. By 25, I had saved enough to purchase a modest ranch house in Wheat Ridge, 20 minutes from my childhood neighborhood. The 1,200-square-foot home needed extensive work, but I saw potential in its solid bones and large backyard. I spent evenings and weekends gutting outdated bathrooms, updating electrical systems, and refinishing hardwood floors that had been hidden under worn carpeting for decades. My parents visited once during the renovation, spending 15 minutes walking through the construction zone before Mom commented that the neighborhood seemed a bit rough, and Dad suggested I consider renting instead of buying. They left early to attend Ryan's pre-law society dinner at the university, where he was receiving another academic honor. I continued sanding cabinet doors alone that evening, the quiet house filled only with the sound of my electric sander and distant traffic. The contrast became painfully clear during family gatherings. Ryan would regale relatives with stories of his legal internships, mock trial victories, and law school application successes, while I listened from the kitchen helping Mom serve dinner or washing dishes. When cousins or family friends asked about my work, my parents would briefly mention my handyman business before redirecting conversation to Ryan's latest accomplishments. My growing client base, successful projects, and increasing income remained invisible achievements in their eyes. 3 years later, my business employed 2 full-time workers and maintained a waiting list of potential clients. I had expanded into commercial projects, partnering with local real estate agents to flip investment properties. My bank account grew steadily through careful budgeting and reinvestment in quality tools and equipment. Yet at family dinners, I remained the son who never reached his potential, while Ryan prepared for law school applications. The devastating truth arrived during my recovery 3 days after the accident that should have brought my family rushing to my bedside. Nurse Jennifer, a kind woman in her 50s who had been checking my vitals twice daily, mentioned during her evening rounds that my parents had indeed called the hospital on the night of my accident. They had asked detailed questions about visiting hours, my condition, and the location of my room. But when they learned that Ryan's graduation ceremony would run until nearly 10 o'clock, followed by a reception that could last until midnight, they chose to attend the celebration instead of coming to see their injured son. The phone records showed they called back an hour later, asking if I would still be in the hospital the following day, as if my broken bones and internal injuries were an inconvenience that might resolve themselves overnight. They never called again to check on my condition, send flowers, or arrange for anyone else to visit on their behalf. They simply chose their golden child's party over their injured son's bedside, calculating that my emergency could wait while their social obligations took priority. The following 3 weeks blurred together in a haze of pain medication, physical therapy sessions, and crushing loneliness. My hospital room overlooked the parking lot where I watched families hurrying toward the entrance with flower bouquets and worried expressions, knowing none of them were coming to see me. The nurses, particularly Jennifer and Carlos, became my primary human contact, checking vitals and adjusting medications while offering gentle encouragement about my recovery progress. Jake Morrison, my best friend since community college, appeared at my bedside every evening after his shift at the fire department. His broad shoulders filled the uncomfortable visitor chair as he updated me on neighborhood news, brought takeout from our favorite Mexican restaurant, and helped me navigate insurance paperwork that seemed designed to confuse injured patients. Jake had witnessed my family dynamic over the years, attending birthday parties where Ryan dominated conversation while I served drinks, watching Christmas mornings, where my practical gifts were overshadowed by elaborate presents for my brother. The contrast between Jake's loyalty and my family's absence became more striking each day. He arranged for his wife Maria to water my houseplants, forwarded important mail to the hospital, and coordinated with my construction crew to postpone ongoing projects until I could return to work. When I worried about losing clients due to the delay, Jake spent his weekend calling each customer, personally explaining my situation, and arranging for trusted contractors to complete urgent repairs. My business clients surprised me with an outpouring of support that my own family never provided. Mrs. Henderson, whose kitchen remodel had launched my career 6 years earlier, organized a meal train through her church congregation. Every evening brought home-cooked dinners, fresh bread, and handwritten notes wishing me speedy recovery. The Ramirez family, whose basement I had finished the previous summer, sent a massive flower arrangement with a card signed by all four children. Even Mr. Thompson, a gruff retired electrician, whose deck I had built 2 years ago, stopped by with a crossword puzzle book and spent an hour sharing stories about his own construction accidents. These gestures of genuine care highlighted the deafening silence from my parents and Ryan. No flowers, no cards, no phone calls to check my condition or ask about my needs. The few text messages I received from Mom contained generic platitudes about hoping I felt better soon, as if I were recovering from a common cold, rather than life-threatening injuries. Ryan sent a single message asking when I would be released, because he needed help moving his law school belongings to a new apartment near his firm. During the second week, Jake brought news from the outside world that made my isolation even more painful. He had encountered my father at the grocery store where Dad enthusiastically described Ryan's job offer at Morrison, Hayes & Patterson, one of Denver's most prestigious law firms. The starting salary exceeded what I earned annually from my construction business, and my parents were planning a celebration dinner at the country club to mark their son's entry into the legal profession. When Jake mentioned my accident and ongoing hospitalization, Dad had responded with awkward surprise, as if he had forgotten about my condition entirely. He claimed they had been meaning to visit, but were overwhelmed with helping Ryan prepare for his new career. Jake's retelling of this conversation confirmed what I had suspected but hoped was untrue. My parents viewed my injuries as an inconvenience that interrupted their focus on Ryan's achievements. Physical therapy became my refuge from emotional pain. Learning to walk again with metal pins in my leg required intense concentration that temporarily blocked thoughts of family abandonment. Sarah, my physical therapist, designed exercises that gradually restored strength and mobility while teaching me techniques for managing chronic pain that would likely persist for years. Her encouragement and professional expertise provided the motivation my family failed to offer. During the third week, I overheard a conversation that shattered my remaining illusions about my parents' character. Carlos mentioned that his cousin worked at the country club where my family held memberships and had served at Ryan's graduation celebration. According to the cousin, my parents had spent the evening accepting congratulations and sharing details about Ryan's law school honors, his job placement, and their pride in his accomplishments. When other guests asked about their older son, my parents had described me as going through a rough patch after a minor car accident, but emphasized that I was resilient and would bounce back quickly. They had minimized my injuries to avoid appearing negligent for missing hospital visits, transforming my life-threatening crash into a trivial inconvenience that barely warranted concern. The realization that they were actively lying to protect their social reputation, while I lay broken and abandoned in a hospital bed, marked the final destruction of any remaining loyalty I felt toward them. This betrayal cut deeper than their absence, revealing calculated deception rather than simple neglect. They were not overwhelmed or forgetful. They were deliberately choosing to minimize my suffering to maintain their image as perfect parents. The parents I had spent 28 years trying to please existed only in my imagination, replaced by strangers who valued appearances over authenticity, social status over genuine care. Jake found me crying that evening, the first tears I had shed since the accident. The emotional dam had finally broken under the weight of accumulated abandonment and deliberate deception. He sat quietly while I sobbed through 28 years of stored pain, offering tissues and silent support until exhaustion replaced anger. That night marked the beginning of my real recovery, not just from physical injuries, but from the toxic hope that my parents might someday value me as much as they cherished Ryan. 6 months after the accident, Peterson Renovations experienced unprecedented growth that transformed my modest business into a thriving enterprise. The recovery period had given me time to develop new marketing strategies, research industry trends, and plan expansion that previously seemed impossible while managing daily operations. My forced absence had also demonstrated the loyalty of existing clients, many of whom waited months rather than hiring competitors for their projects. The breakthrough came when Mrs. Patterson, a satisfied customer whose master bathroom I had renovated before the accident, posted before and after photos on her social media accounts. Her friends and followers, impressed by the dramatic transformation from outdated fixtures to spa-like luxury, began sharing the images across their networks. Within days, my phone rang constantly with consultation requests from homeowners across the Denver metropolitan area. My first major commercial contract arrived through an unexpected connection. The Ramirez family, whose basement finishing project had earned their gratitude and friendship, recommended me to Mr. Ramirez's employer, a property management company specializing in apartment complex renovations. The initial walkthrough revealed a 12-unit building requiring complete kitchen and bathroom updates, new flooring, and exterior painting that would take my crew 4 months to complete. I hired Jake's brother-in-law, Tommy, a skilled electrician seeking steady work after his previous employer closed. Next came Angela, a recent graduate from the construction technology program I had completed years earlier, eager to learn finish carpentry and project management. Finally, I recruited David Chen, an experienced plumber whose attention to detail matched my own standards for quality workmanship. The crew dynamic exceeded my expectations. Tommy brought expertise in electrical code compliance that helped us avoid costly inspection delays. Angela's fresh perspective and willingness to tackle challenging tasks impressed clients who had never seen a female carpenter. David's plumbing installations were works of art with perfectly aligned fixtures and leak-proof connections that would last decades. Together, we completed the apartment complex renovation 2 weeks ahead of schedule and $5,000 under budget. Success led to additional opportunities. The property management company hired us for 2 more buildings, and word spread to other real estate investors seeking reliable contractors for flip projects. I purchased a second truck, upgraded our tool inventory, and rented warehouse space for material storage and project staging. My business bank account, carefully managed through years of conservative spending, grew from $20,000 to $65,000 in 6 months. Personal life improvements accompanied professional growth. I traded my aging pickup truck for a new Ford F-150 crew cab that could transport my team and equipment efficiently. The ranch house I had purchased years earlier received long overdue updates, stainless steel kitchen appliances, hardwood floor refinishing, and a master bedroom addition that doubled the living space. These investments felt earned through honest labor and careful financial planning. Despite my growing success, contact with my family remained minimal and superficial. Mom called occasionally, usually to ask for help with household repairs or to suggest I provide free labor for their friends' projects. Dad would mention my business during these conversations, but always in dismissive terms that suggested manual labor was beneath our family's educational achievements. They never asked about my recovery, my employees, or my personal satisfaction with the work I had chosen. Ryan's legal career dominated family conversations whenever we spoke. He had passed the bar examination on his first attempt, earning celebration dinners and gifts from our parents. His starting salary at Morrison, Hayes & Patterson exceeded $90,000 annually, plus bonuses and benefits that impressed our relatives and family friends. My parents regularly shared details about his cases, his colleagues, and his potential for partnership track advancement. The stark contrast became painfully obvious during a family barbecue at my parents' house in late September. I arrived wearing clean jeans and a polo shirt, having worked a half day to accommodate the family gathering. Ryan appeared in an expensive suit, fresh from his law office, carrying leather briefcase, and discussing a corporate merger case with Dad, while Mom prepared his favorite appetizers. As we gathered on their patio, I attempted to share news about my recent commercial contracts and business expansion. Dad listened politely before redirecting conversation to Ryan's achievements, asking detailed questions about legal strategies and client relationships while ignoring my contributions entirely. When I mentioned hiring 3 employees and considering additional warehouse space, Mom suggested I be careful not to overextend myself financially, as if my 6-year business track record meant nothing. The devastating moment came when I excused myself to use the bathroom and overheard Dad talking to Ryan near the kitchen window. "Marcus seems to be doing well with his little construction projects," Dad said, his voice carrying the condescending tone I remembered from childhood. "But it's still just manual labor, you know. Anyone with a strong back can do construction work. What you're doing at the firm requires real intelligence, education, and skill." Ryan's response surprised me with its hesitation. "I don't know, Dad. Marcus has built a successful business from nothing. That takes more than just physical strength." But Dad dismissed this observation, launching into praise for Ryan's legal research abilities and potential for partnership advancement within 5 years. Standing in their hallway listening to my father diminish 28 years of effort and achievement, I finally understood that my success would never matter to them. They had decided long ago that intellectual work held more value than skilled trades, that white-collar careers deserved more respect than blue-collar businesses. My growing income satisfied clients. An expanding enterprise meant nothing because they fundamentally didn't respect who I was or what I had chosen to do with my life. The remainder of the barbecue passed in a blur of polite conversation and forced smiles. I left early, claiming exhaustion from work projects, and drove home to my quiet house, where I could process the emotional impact of my father's words. That evening, I made 2 important decisions. I would continue building my business without seeking their approval, and I would stop hoping for recognition that would never come from people who measured worth through their own narrow definitions of success. Ryan's transition from law school graduate to practicing attorney appeared seamless from the outside, but subtle signs suggested cracks beneath his polished exterior. During family gatherings throughout the fall and winter, his confident demeanor occasionally slipped, revealing glimpses of stress and uncertainty that he quickly masked with professional jargon and expensive accessories. His new apartment in downtown Denver's prestigious Lodo district featured floor-to-ceiling windows, granite countertops, and monthly rent that exceeded my mortgage payment. The furnishings looked expensive but temporary, as if he were living in a hotel rather than creating a home. When I visited to help him assemble furniture, I noticed empty beer bottles in the trash despite his claims of being too busy to socialize. And credit card statements scattered across his kitchen counter showed balances that seemed high, even for someone earning his salary. Ryan's work schedule consumed his life in ways that concerned even our achievement-obsessed parents. He regularly worked until midnight, spent weekends at the office preparing briefs, and carried his phone constantly answering calls from partners and clients regardless of the time or setting. During Christmas dinner, he stepped outside 3 times to handle urgent legal matters that couldn't wait for the holiday to end. The pressure manifested in subtle behavioral changes that became more noticeable over time. Ryan, who had always been confident and articulate, began speaking faster and interrupting conversations more frequently. His hands shook slightly when he thought no one was looking, and he frequently checked his watch as if calculating time remaining for unknown deadlines. The brother who had effortlessly excelled at everything now seemed to be struggling to keep pace with expectations that grew heavier each month. My own business continued thriving throughout the winter, providing a stark contrast to Ryan's obvious stress. Peterson Renovations completed 3 major commercial projects, including a restaurant renovation that earned recognition in a local design magazine. The positive publicity generated additional inquiries from business owners seeking quality contractors for expansion and remodeling projects. By spring, my savings account contained $85,000, carefully invested in certificates of deposit and mutual funds that provided steady growth while maintaining liquidity for business opportunities. The financial security felt surreal after years of living paycheck to paycheck, but it represented the reward for consistent effort and careful money management, rather than lottery luck or inheritance. Jake had been promoted to lieutenant at the fire department, and our friendship deepened as we both navigated career advancement and adult responsibilities. He and Maria were expecting their first child, and I had agreed to renovate their nursery and install child safety features throughout their house. Working on projects for people who valued my skills and trusted my judgment provided satisfaction that family approval could never match. The first clear indication of Ryan's serious problems came during a late April visit to my parents' house. I had stopped by to fix their leaking bathroom faucet, a job that required an hour of work and saved them $200 in plumber charges. Ryan arrived unexpectedly looking disheveled and agitated despite his expensive clothing and usually meticulous grooming. He asked strange questions about my business operations, particularly focusing on cash transactions and record-keeping requirements. "Do all your clients pay by check?" he asked, "or do some pay cash for tax reasons?" When I explained that most payments came through bank transfers or business checks with only small repair jobs paid in cash, he pressed for details about how I reported cash income to the Internal Revenue Service. The questions made me uncomfortable, but I answered honestly, explaining that legitimate businesses report all income regardless of payment method. Ryan's follow-up questions revealed concerning gaps in his understanding of business ethics and legal requirements. He seemed particularly interested in whether clients ever paid extra for discretionary work, or if I maintained separate records for different types of projects. Our parents, busy preparing dinner and entertaining neighbors, missed the increasingly odd nature of Ryan's questions. But I recognized signs of someone fishing for information about financial impropriety, as if he were researching options for hiding income or manipulating business records. The conversation ended abruptly when Dad called us to the patio for drinks, but Ryan's nervous energy and unusual focus on questionable business practices left me deeply unsettled. 2 weeks later, Ryan called me at 11 o'clock on a Thursday evening claiming he needed advice about a hypothetical legal situation involving a friend who was considering questionable financial decisions. The friend, according to Ryan's story, had access to client funds through his job and was considering borrowing money temporarily to cover personal expenses with plans to repay the amount before anyone noticed. I advised against any scenario involving unauthorized use of other people's money, explaining that such actions constituted theft, regardless of repayment intentions. Ryan argued that the legal system was more nuanced than my simplistic interpretation, and that temporary use of funds might not violate criminal statutes if certain conditions were met. The conversation revealed a troubling willingness to rationalize clearly unethical behavior through legal technicalities. As spring turned to summer, Ryan's behavior became increasingly erratic. He purchased a new BMW sports car despite living in an apartment with limited parking and began wearing expensive watches and designer clothing that seemed extravagant even for his income level. When Mom praised his success and asked about his financial management, Ryan deflected questions with vague references to investment opportunities and bonus structures that he couldn't discuss due to confidentiality agreements. The breaking point came during a family gathering at my parents' house in early June. Ryan arrived 3 hours late, claiming that urgent client business had delayed his departure from the office. His explanation seemed rehearsed, and his nervous energy was more pronounced than ever. Throughout dinner, he excused himself repeatedly to take phone calls that he claimed were from clients, but which seemed to agitate rather than please him. During dessert, Ryan's phone buzzed with a text message that visibly shook him. His face went pale as he read the message, and his hands trembled as he placed the phone face down on the table. When Dad asked if everything was all right, Ryan mumbled something about work complications and difficult clients before abruptly announcing he needed to leave immediately. As he gathered his belongings, Ryan pulled me aside and asked if I would be available to talk privately within the next few days. The request seemed urgent, and his demeanor suggested panic, rather than casual interest in brotherly conversation. I agreed to meet him for coffee that weekend, having no idea that his work complications involved criminal activity that would soon destroy everything our parents had spent years building around his perfect image. The call came at 2:30 on Sunday morning, waking me from deep sleep, with Ryan's voice shaking so violently I could barely understand his words. Between sobs and desperate breathing, he confessed that he had been taking money from client accounts to pay for his lifestyle and cover gambling debts that had spiraled beyond his control. The law firm had discovered discrepancies totaling over $200,000, and criminal charges were being filed within days. "I need you to promise not to tell Mom and Dad yet," he begged through tears. "I have a plan to fix everything, but I need time to make it work. Please, Marcus, just give me a few days to figure this out before they find out their perfect son is going to prison." 3 days after Ryan's desperate midnight confession, my parents appeared at my front door, without calling ahead, their usually composed faces etched with devastation and disbelief. Mom's eyes were red from crying, and Dad's normally perfect appearance showed signs of sleepless nights and overwhelming stress. The newspaper folded under Dad's arm featured a headline about fraud charges against a local attorney, complete with Ryan's professional headshot, and details about his arrest that made their worst fears undeniably real. They entered my living room as if walking through a funeral home, moving with the careful precision of people trying to maintain dignity, while their world collapsed around them. Mom clutched her purse with white knuckles, her teacher composure cracked beyond repair. Dad placed the newspaper on my coffee table with shaking hands, unable to speak about the article that transformed their golden child into front-page criminal news. The initial silence stretched for several minutes as they struggled to form words around the magnitude of Ryan's betrayal. When Dad finally spoke, his voice cracked with the weight of 26 years of dreams being destroyed in a single weekend. "We found out from a neighbor who saw the newspaper before we did," he said. "Our son's arrest was breakfast conversation for the entire neighborhood, while we slept peacefully, completely unaware that our family name was being destroyed." Mom described the horror of learning about Ryan's crimes from strangers rather than their son. The phone had been ringing constantly since the news broke, with relatives, friends, and colleagues calling to express shock and offer support that felt more like curiosity about family scandal. She had stopped answering after the 5th call, unable to bear explaining a situation she didn't understand herself. The financial devastation was staggering. They had already spent $60,000 on criminal defense attorney fees, emptying their savings account and forcing them to mortgage their house for additional funds. The attorney had warned that total legal costs could reach $150,000, depending on the complexity of the case and the possibility of federal charges being added to state crimes. Dad's retirement plans, carefully constructed over 30 years of insurance industry success, had evaporated overnight. The mortgage on their house, which they had planned to pay off within 5 years, now carried additional debt that would extend payments well into his 70s. Mom faced the possibility of working past retirement age to cover living expenses and legal fees that threatened to bankrupt their previously secure financial situation. But the emotional cost exceeded even the financial destruction. Ryan's arrest had shattered their identity as successful parents who had raised accomplished children. The country club memberships, dinner party conversations, and holiday gatherings, where they had proudly discussed Ryan's achievements, now became sources of shame and social isolation. Friends and colleagues who had celebrated Ryan's success were now questioning their judgment and wondering what they had missed. As they described the magnitude of their crisis, I listened with growing amazement at their complete focus on their own suffering. Not once did they mention concern for Ryan's well-being, his emotional state, or his future, beyond how his crimes affected their reputation and financial security. Their golden child had become a liability to be managed rather than a son who needed support during the worst period of his life. The conversation took a shocking turn when Dad leaned forward with the desperate intensity of a drowning man reaching for a life preserver. "Marcus, we need your help," he said, his voice carrying an authority that expected compliance rather than requesting assistance. "You're the only one who can save this family from complete destruction. We know you've been successful with your business, and we need you to step up during this crisis." Mom's tears returned as she began an emotional appeal that combined maternal guilt with financial desperation. "We've always supported you even when you chose construction work over college," she said conveniently, forgetting years of dismissive comments about manual labor and their absence during my hospitalization. "Now we need you to support the family when everything we've worked for is falling apart." The specific request was breathtaking in its presumption. They wanted me to provide $75,000 immediately to cover remaining legal fees and help them avoid losing their house. Dad presented this demand as a family obligation rather than a favor, explaining that my success was partly due to the foundation they had provided through my upbringing and education. But their justification revealed the twisted logic that had governed our family dynamics for decades. They claimed that all their financial sacrifices had been invested in Ryan's education, with the understanding that his success would benefit the entire family. Now that their investment had failed catastrophically, I was expected to compensate for their losses through my independently earned money. Mom's emotional manipulation reached new depths as she described the shame of potentially losing their house, the embarrassment of bankruptcy proceedings, and the destruction of their social standing in the community. "You have the power to prevent all of this," she sobbed. "One decision from you can save our family's reputation and future. How can you live with yourself if you let us lose everything when you have the means to help?" The conversation grew more disturbing as Dad revealed their long-term expectations. This wouldn't be a one-time loan, but rather an ongoing financial responsibility where I would supplement their reduced income and help maintain their previous lifestyle. They had calculated my business earnings and savings, apparently planning this request for weeks, while I remained unaware of their criminal son's activities and their resulting financial catastrophe. When I expressed reluctance to hand over my life savings to cover their mistakes and Ryan's crimes, Dad's desperation transformed into angry ultimatum. "We've given you everything," he declared, his voice rising with indignation. "This house, your education, your opportunities, everything you have, came from our sacrifices. Now when we need you most, you're being selfish and ungrateful." The threat came in the form of permanent family exile. If I refused to provide the money they demanded, they would cut all contact and remove me from their will entirely. I would lose my inheritance, my place in family gatherings, and my connection to extended relatives who would be told that I had abandoned my parents during their greatest crisis. They painted a picture of complete social isolation as punishment for failing to bankrupt myself to solve their problems. Mom's final appeal combined emotional blackmail with outright lies about our family history. "We've always treated you and Ryan equally," she claimed, apparently forgetting decades of favoritism and the hospital abandonment that had crystallized their true priorities. "We've supported your choices and celebrated your successes just like we did with Ryan. Now we're asking you to show the same loyalty we've always shown you." Sitting in my living room, listening to my parents transform their criminal son's crisis into my moral obligation, I realized that Ryan's fraud was just the latest symptom of a family system built on lies, manipulation, and conditional love. They had created this monster through years of worshiping success without examining the methods used to achieve it, and now they expected me to pay for the consequence of their toxic parenting while accepting blame for their financial ruin. The meeting ended with an ultimatum. I had 48 hours to decide whether to save my family or destroy it through selfishness and ingratitude. As they gathered their belongings and prepared to leave, Dad delivered one final threat that revealed the depths of their desperation and entitlement. Remember, Marcus, family loyalty goes both ways. If you abandon us now, don't expect us to be there when you need help in the future. Watching my parents drive away in their luxury car to return to their mortgaged house, filled with expensive belongings they expected me to help them keep, I understood that this crisis had revealed their true character in ways that decades of subtle favoritism never could. They saw me not as a son who deserved love and respect, but as a financial resource to be manipulated through guilt and threatened with abandonment if I failed to comply with their demands. The family meeting I called for the following Saturday would have seemed impossible 6 months earlier, when I still harbored hopes of earning my parents' respect and approval. But Ryan's confession and their subsequent financial demands had clarified the dysfunction that had poisoned our relationships for decades. I spent 3 days preparing documentation and planning a confrontation that would finally force honesty into our family's foundation of lies and manipulation. My parents arrived at their house 15 minutes early, clearly hoping to coordinate their strategy before Ryan's appearance. They had dressed carefully for this meeting, Mom in her teaching clothes that projected authority and respectability, Dad in the business attire that had intimidated me throughout childhood. Their preparation revealed expectations of controlling the conversation and pressuring me into compliance through familiar patterns of guilt and emotional manipulation. Ryan appeared precisely on time, looking haggard despite his expensive clothing. The confident attorney who had dominated family gatherings was gone, replaced by a frightened man facing federal prison time and professional destruction. His hands shook as he poured coffee, and his eyes avoided direct contact with anyone in the room. The brother who had effortlessly excelled at everything now carried himself like a defendant awaiting sentencing. I began by spreading documents across the dining room table that had hosted countless celebrations of Ryan's achievements, while my accomplishments went unnoticed. The timeline I had created detailed 28 years of favoritism documented through report cards, graduation programs, newspaper clippings, and family photos that showed the stark difference in treatment and attention between their two sons. Elementary school records revealed the pattern that would define our childhood. While I struggled with undiagnosed learning disabilities, receiving minimal support or accommodation, Ryan's every educational need received immediate attention and expensive intervention. Tutoring costs, enrichment programs, and private coaching expenses that I never received were carefully tracked through old tax documents and credit card statements. High school documentation showed the escalation of preferential treatment. Ryan's activities received full family support, travel expenses for tournaments, equipment purchases, and celebration dinners that filled our family calendar. My vocational interests were dismissed as hobbies, while his academic pursuits were treated as investments in our family's future success and reputation. College years crystallized their priorities through financial records that I had never seen before. Ryan's education received over $120,000 in family support, covering tuition, living expenses, and study abroad programs that my parents considered essential for his development. My community college education, costing less than $8,000 total, was paid through my own savings and student loans, with minimal family assistance. The business documentation section revealed their attitude toward my professional success. Despite Peterson Renovations generating annual revenue exceeding $200,000 and employing 4 people, my parents had never asked about my business plan, celebrated major contracts, or acknowledged the entrepreneurial skills required to build a successful company from nothing. But the hospital records provided the most damning evidence of their character. I had requested documentation from the night of my accident showing not only their phone calls asking about visiting hours, but also their decision to prioritize Ryan's graduation celebration over their critically injured son's medical emergency. The timeline proved their abandonment was calculated rather than accidental. Ryan's reaction to this evidence surprised me with its emotional intensity. As I detailed the preferential treatment he had received throughout our lives, tears began streaming down his face in recognition of damage he had never previously acknowledged. "I knew they treated you differently," he whispered, "but I never realized how completely they dismissed everything you did. I thought they just had different expectations for both of us." Mom's defensive response revealed the depth of her denial about their parenting failures. She claimed that different treatment reflected different needs, arguing that Ryan's academic gifts required more support, while my practical skills needed less intervention. This rationalization ignored years of dismissing my achievements and failing to provide encouragement during my struggles with learning disabilities. Dad's anger emerged when I detailed their recent financial demands and ultimatums. "You're twisting everything to make us look like villains," he shouted, his composure cracking under the weight of documented evidence. "We're facing bankruptcy because of Ryan's mistakes, and instead of helping your family, you're attacking us with ancient history that has nothing to do with our current crisis." The confrontation intensified when I revealed my knowledge of Ryan's previous smaller thefts and gambling activities that they had covered up during his college years. Dad's credit card statements showed mysterious cash advances totaling $15,000 during Ryan's senior year payments that coincided with Ryan's temporary financial difficulties that were never discussed with me or other family members. My terms for any assistance were non-negotiable and designed to force accountability rather than enable continued dysfunction. First, Ryan would enter gambling addiction treatment and accept responsibility for his crimes without expecting family money to minimize legal consequences. Second, my parents would acknowledge in writing their decades of preferential treatment and commit to family therapy, addressing their toxic parenting patterns. Finally, any financial assistance would be structured as a legitimate business loan, with legal documentation, interest payments, and collateral requirements that protected my investment while preventing future manipulation. I would consider lending $30,000 maximum, enough to supplement their legal fees, but not enough to maintain their previous lifestyle without significant changes. The explosion came from Ryan rather than our parents, shocking everyone with its intensity and honesty. "I can't live with this pressure anymore," he screamed, his carefully constructed image finally cracking completely. "Do you know what it's like being the perfect son? Every decision, every grade, every achievement has to maintain this impossible standard that you two created." His confession poured out in waves of accumulated resentment and psychological damage. The gambling had started in college as stress relief from academic pressure, but quickly became an addiction that provided temporary escape from expectations that felt suffocating rather than supportive. The theft began as small amounts to cover betting losses, but escalated when early wins convinced him that gambling could solve rather than create financial problems. "I've been jealous of Marcus for years," Ryan sobbed, finally admitting emotions he had hidden behind academic success and professional achievement. "He built something real with his own hands, while I've been living a lie, stealing money to maintain an image that was making me miserable. At least when people dismiss his work, it's honest work that helps families and builds communities." The revelation that Ryan viewed my life as preferable to his own stunned our parents into temporary silence. Their golden child was confessing that their favoritism had created psychological pressure that contributed to his criminal behavior, while their dismissed son had built genuine success through honest effort and authentic relationships. Mom's tears reflected the beginning of real understanding about the damage they had caused both sons through their toxic emphasis on image over character. "We thought we were giving you every advantage," she whispered to Ryan. "We never realized that our expectations were hurting you instead of helping you succeed." Dad's anger gradually transformed into confused recognition that their parenting philosophy had produced a criminal son and an alienated son, neither of whom felt genuinely loved for who they were rather than what they achieved. The family meeting that was supposed to pressure me into financial compliance had become an intervention forcing acknowledgement of decades of dysfunction and its devastating consequences. By evening's end, Ryan had agreed to enter treatment and accept legal responsibility for his crimes without expecting family money to buy minimal sentences. My parents committed to family therapy and written acknowledgement of their favoritism as conditions for any financial assistance. The loan structure would protect my interest while providing limited support during their crisis. The meeting ended with exhausted recognition that our family would never return to previous patterns of interaction. The lies, manipulation, and favoritism that had defined our relationships for 28 years were finally exposed and acknowledged. Whatever family we rebuilt would require honesty, accountability, and respect for each person's individual worth rather than conditional love, based on meeting impossible expectations. 6 months after our devastating family confrontation, the transformation in our relationships exceeded anything I had imagined possible. The structured loan agreement I had provided protected my financial interests while giving my parents breathing room to address their crisis without losing their house. More importantly, the accountability measures we had established forced genuine examination of patterns that had poisoned our family dynamics for decades. Ryan's journey through the legal system and addiction recovery proved more challenging, but ultimately more healing than anyone expected. He pleaded guilty to embezzlement charges and received 3 years probation with community service requirements and full restitution to his victims. The law firm dismissed him immediately, but his voluntary entry into gambling addiction treatment and cooperation with prosecutors prevented federal charges that would have meant prison time. His new job at the public defender's office paid 60% less than his previous salary, but provided satisfaction that his corporate work had never offered. Representing clients who couldn't afford private attorneys reminded him that legal skills could serve justice rather than just profit. The humbler lifestyle forced him to examine his values and find self-worth through service rather than material accumulation. The gambling addiction treatment revealed psychological patterns that had begun in childhood with our parents' emphasis on perfection and achievement. Ryan's therapist helped him understand that the addiction had provided temporary escape from pressure to maintain an impossible standard of constant success. Learning to accept failure and imperfection as normal human experiences reduced the anxiety that had driven his destructive behaviors. My parents' participation in family therapy initially felt forced and resentful, but gradually became genuine exploration of their parenting mistakes and relationship patterns. Mom struggled with admitting that her favoritism had damaged both sons, while Dad resisted acknowledging that his dismissive attitude toward my career reflected his own narrow definitions of success and worth. The written acknowledgement they provided as part of our loan agreement became a catalyst for deeper conversations about childhood experiences and family expectations. For the first time in 28 years, they asked detailed questions about my business, my goals, and my satisfaction with the path I had chosen. Their growing understanding and respect felt more valuable than any financial inheritance they might have threatened to withhold. Peterson Renovations continued thriving throughout this period of family crisis and healing. The commercial projects that had established my reputation led to additional opportunities with property developers and business owners seeking quality contractors for expansion and renovation work. By year's end, my crew had grown to 6 employees, and my annual income exceeded Ryan's previous lawyer salary. The personal satisfaction of building something meaningful with honest effort provided perspective on family relationships that I had never possessed. Success earned through my own skills and perseverance felt more secure and authentic than achievements dependent on parental approval or social recognition. The clients who trusted my work and recommended my services offered validation that family dynamics had never provided. Jake's friendship remained a cornerstone of my support system throughout this difficult period. His promotion to fire department captain coincided with the birth of his daughter Emma, whose nursery renovation became one of my most enjoyable projects. Working for people who valued both my skills and my friendship reminded me that chosen families can provide love and loyalty that blood relationships sometimes fail to offer. The relationship that emerged with Sarah Mitchell, a teacher at Jake's daughter's daycare, surprised me with its natural development and emotional depth. Unlike previous dating relationships that felt forced or temporary, our connection grew through shared interests in community service, outdoor activities, and authentic conversation about life goals and values. She appreciated my work ethic and craftsmanship while challenging me to consider new perspectives on family, career, and personal growth. Our first serious conversation about family dynamics occurred during a hiking trip in Rocky Mountain National Park, where the peaceful mountain setting encouraged honest discussion about childhood experiences and current relationships. Sarah's background included divorced parents who had maintained respectful co-parenting relationships, providing a model of healthy family interaction that contrasted sharply with my experience of favoritism and emotional manipulation. Her insight that families could support individual growth while maintaining loving connections helped me understand that setting boundaries with my parents was not betrayal, but rather healthy relationship management. The loan structure and accountability measures I had established represented appropriate responses to their behavior rather than vindictive punishment for past mistakes. The Christmas gathering that year marked the first family celebration where conversations felt genuine rather than performed. Ryan's humility about his mistakes and commitment to rebuilding his life earned respect that his previous achievements had never generated. My parents' growing acknowledgement of my success and their mistakes created space for authentic relationship development. Mom's request for my advice about her teaching career surprised me with its sincerity and respect for my judgment. She was considering early retirement to focus on volunteer work with adult literacy programs and wanted my perspective on the financial implications and personal satisfaction of career transitions. The conversation felt like the first time she had viewed me as an adult whose opinions mattered. Dad's transformation proved even more dramatic. He began asking detailed questions about my business operations, construction techniques, and project management strategies with genuine curiosity rather than condescending interest. His background in insurance provided useful insights about liability protection and business insurance that helped me improve company operations. The loan repayment schedule proceeded exactly as planned, with my parents meeting every monthly payment and maintaining regular communication about their financial recovery. More importantly, they honored the behavioral commitments that had been conditions for my assistants, participating consistently in family therapy and acknowledging their mistakes without defensiveness or rationalization. Ryan's recovery milestones included paying full restitution to his victims ahead of schedule through his public defender salary and weekend construction work with my crew. The physical labor that our father had once dismissed as beneath our family's educational achievements became therapeutic activity that helped Ryan rebuild self-respect through honest effort and useful contribution. The life lesson that emerged from our family crisis centered on the difference between genuine love and conditional approval. My parents had spent decades confusing achievement with worth believing that pushing their children toward conventional success demonstrated care and investment. But real love required accepting people for who they were while supporting their authentic goals and values. My own healing involved releasing the hope for parental approval that had driven decades of frustrated effort to earn recognition and respect. Building success through my own vision and values provided satisfaction that external validation could never match. The family relationships that developed after our confrontation felt more honest and sustainable because they were based on mutual respect rather than performance expectations. The business success that had initially motivated my parents' financial demands became secondary to the personal growth and authentic relationships that emerge from our crisis. Peterson Renovations would continue growing and serving clients throughout the Denver area, but my identity no longer depended solely on professional achievement or financial accumulation. As I reflected on the year's events while planning my engagement proposal to Sarah, I realized that the car accident that had seemed like devastating misfortune had actually revealed truths about family dynamics that might have remained hidden for years. The hospital abandonment that had initially broken my heart became the catalyst for demanding honesty and respect in all my relationships. The fraud scandal that had threatened to destroy our family ultimately forced the accountability and healing that previous interventions had never achieved. Ryan's mistakes created opportunities for genuine change rather than continued dysfunction. While my parents' crisis motivated examination of patterns they had never previously questioned. Standing in my renovated house, surrounded by successful business records, and planning a future with someone who valued my authentic self, I understood that family loyalty meant supporting each other's growth rather than maintaining destructive patterns through misguided obligation. The boundaries I had established protected everyone involved while creating space for relationships based on choice rather than guilt. The savings account that my parents had demanded I empty to solve their crisis had actually grown throughout the year through continued business success and careful financial management. But more importantly, the emotional maturity I had gained through setting boundaries and demanding accountability provided security that money alone could never offer. If you've ever felt like the forgotten child in your family, or struggled with relatives who only value certain types of success, I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments below. How did you handle family dynamics that made you feel invisible or unimportant? Please like this video. If it resonated with your own story, subscribe for more real-life experiences about family challenges and personal growth. And share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing that they're not alone in dealing with family favoritism. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that your worth isn't determined by other people's recognition, even when those people are family. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves and our loved ones is the courage to demand the respect and authenticity that healthy relationships require.